Hello traders, welcome back to this week's Mastering the Markets with me, Matt. As you guys all already know, I'm a senior market analyst at PrimeXBT, and I'm super excited to be here with you guys this week to go over a couple of really key fundamental points that we've just actually had now. We just had the core CPI as well as the CPI inflation data results coming out for the US. So there's obviously been a lot going on in the last couple of minutes. And I think it's going to be quite important to just kind of dive straight into it, have a little bit of a post-analysis session from both a fundamental perspective as well as looking at a couple of the charts. So I'm going to dive right into how I'm actually going to just run with today's session. You can already see here, we have seen some really big moves across the dollar as well as the dollar index and euro dollar and the likes. You know, we've got the S&P 500 almost down 1.5% on the day. We've seen some really tremendous sort of price action post this sort of, CPI inflation data result that just came out now. So you can already see here just on the day how we've almost had a decrease of pretty much 1.2%. Now, I know I was going to do a crypto update specifically with you guys, and we're going to get into that as well a little bit later. But I just wanted to kind of go over the CPI data result with you guys so you can have a look. Now, if you see here, core CPI month on month actually came out higher than forecasted. So previously we had core CPI come out at 0.2%, and actual results for this last month is 0.4%. So we've almost seen a double, which actually suggests that inflation is kind of going back out again. Now, we also know that the Federal Reserve was very tentative in their interest rate decision in the previous month because of pretty much this exact sort of thing. They thought, if they continue to cut interest rates and potentially inflation or core CPI kind of pushes out higher, there might be this risk that we might have to push interest rates higher again. And obviously, depending on what Trump is kind of doing from both a policies perspective and what he is trying to implement, there's obviously a lot going on. So if you have a look over here, we've got Fed Chair speaking a little bit later today, and then we've got a tentative sort of presidential speech from Trump later this afternoon. So it's not really a given right now if he's going to be doing the speech, but I do assume that there might be a bit of reaction from him with regards to this data point, and maybe potentially what Fed Powell has to say. So let's jump straight into it. If you look at the dollar index, you've almost seen, pretty much the same sort of strong bullish momentum stepping back into the market. And I know I mentioned with you guys last week on our previous stream that I really wanted to see this area break down before, it was kind of confirmed if we were going to be potentially seeing these shifts in the market. And, we really are struggling to kind of break through this level over here. And for the most part now, it looks like we kind of just stuck back in this range. And the same can be said for euro dollar, right? I did mention here that I was quite curious to see, how price potentially was going to react in these areas. So let's see if I can bring out the charts from last week. Okay, I can't. But I was quite interested to see how we were going to react out of this area over here. And we've already pretty much rejected this, and it does look like we are continuing back to the downside. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get this low run over here sitting at around 1.0200. Now, if we had to look at this move on the daily, you can already see how price action has been pretty much holding within these areas. And if you have a look over here, you can pretty much see how we were kind of trading in this area sort of pre CPI release, and already post CPI release. You can see quite a big move from the euro dollar as well as the dollar index out of this areas of interest, right? The same can be said for the S&P 500. Pretty much all the charts kind of look the same. They very much are aligned from that angle. And if you have a look over here, you can see we had a massive sort of sell-off out of this area. Same with NASDAQ. I did mention in my daily post yesterday actually that I was quite curious to see how these areas were going to hold, if we were going to be able to break above this trend line over here. And you can see that we've come in here, rejected it once, and now we've rejected it again. And it does look like we're trading back into this daily 50 EMA So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we trade back into this outer sort of ascending trend line. You know, we kind of squeeze around here a bit, and then maybe potentially price does something like this, and we either break out below or we potentially, you know, break out higher. So Nasdaq and the S&P 500 are quite interesting at the moment. If we have a look at Bitcoin, for example, you know, let's get back to the main sort of idea for today's sort of live stream. You know, we're still really stuck in this range. That's why there isn't really much to kind of update on from here. But you know, if we look at this range that we still seem to be in, we seem to be testing this lower bound sort of area at the moment. You know, we've come in here once already, a couple times really, if you think about it. You know, with this being our main sort of run on liquidity over here, and then you can obviously see we had another one here about a couple weeks ago. So this is going to be really interesting. I'm quite curious to see if we do continue to trade lower. You know, are we going to trade back into this area over here, which is our sort of immediate low, or are we going to potentially kind of, you know, look to trade back into sort of higher areas before we potentially decide on where we're going to move to from here? So BTC on the daily is, yeah, really stuck in this range. You can see here for the last couple of weeks now, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 indecision candles in this area, right? You know, we rejected off this daily 50 EMA here again. And if I had to mark out, say, the 50% level of this range, you can see how we've also been just pretty much trading in and around this range for the last sort of week or so. And you know, we haven't really decided where we want to pick up, you know, from a momentum perspective, where we're going to go. So I'm just going to leave this area over here. And now you can see it a bit clearer. You can see how we've tried to break above it, we broke back below it, retested it, and now we seem to be kind of trading back out to this outer range area, if you want to call it that. So that's basically where we've got this pocket that's sitting here with a lot of sort of support, really. This is going to be quite a key area for Bitcoin, I think, going forward. I'm just going to mark this level out here. So that's kind of my view on BTC right now. I'm quite curious to see how we're going to react if we trade back into this 92,000 region. You can see already multiple times how we've tested this area before. So, you know, does this area hold, or do we potentially trade back out into potentially this sort of ascending trend line that we have marked out over here, which may mean we see price trade do something like that before we continue higher. And if I mark out my Fibonacci tool sitting something like this, you know, it kind of lines up in alignment with this area here. So you can also see we've got some displacement sitting here on the 3 daily time frame. So I wouldn't be too alarmed. I would like to see maybe this daily 50 EMA hold here. I wouldn't be surprised if we rebalance into this 80,000 region. I've been saying that for quite some time. I've also kind of been of the opinion that we might just hold in this range over here and then potentially, you know, continue to trade higher. So BTC, really difficult to kind of gauge what price action wants to do going from here. I think that the sentiment around, say, interest rate cuts being paused and stuff like that, that's going to play a like sort of a big crucial area, or, you know, point on Bitcoin specifically, and how the market's going to trade, you know, for the upcoming months. So for the time being, I'm not really too worried. Structurally, everything is still kind of in place for, say, bullish momentum to the upside. But yeah, if these areas really start failing to hold, I wouldn't be surprised if we trade lower. So I'm gonna be watching this with a close eye. I want to see how this level at a 92,000 sort of reacts. Ideally, we see some sort of dip like this, and then, you know, we see some sort of continuation back to the upside. That's ideally what I'm looking for on BTC now. because that would form quite nicely this sort of AMD model, if you want to call it that, where you have this ranging price action, this sort of, you know, manipulation move, and then potentially we see price action kind of, you know, trading back to the upside. So I'd be quite keen to see if Bitcoin can hold its price action, something like this. This is what I'd be looking at. So, you know, if you have a look over here, you can potentially see some areas of interest down here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we dipped our toes into these lower areas before we started to move higher. So keep your eyes out on this. Look out for this formation happening on BTC. It's going to be quite a nice one to trade. Solana, you know, I did scale in some positions last week on Solana based on this sort of entry model over here, where we've had this push to the upside. Again, we really look to be struggling to hold as support. So for the time being, my invalidation point is obviously still this low, which is about 170, and we probably about, call it, yeah, 10 or 11% away from there. So I'm going to be quite curious to see how price action is going to obviously hold in these areas over here, and then I'm going to be looking to kind of see if we can pick up momentum back to the upside, or if maybe we sweep this low over here. I think either of these scenarios are going to be quite interesting to watch. Same with Ethereum. Ethereum basically, you know, all of the charts look the same. The only one that isn't really sitting in this trending ascending trend line is Bitcoin. But a lot of these charts seem to have broken, you know, these sort of areas, or at least are attempting to hold them. You know, and for the most part, like if we look at Ethereum right now, for example, this is just one big range. So very difficult to kind of pick price action and really sort of pick a bias, if you want to call it that. XRP was another one I wanted to kind of go through. And if you have a look at XRP, also something very similar. I mentioned this yesterday on my daily technical analysis charting. But basically, if we have a look here, right, you can kind of see there's a couple of support areas that we have lower here. So for example, if you have a look here, this is where a lot of initial support was found when we made this move back down here to kind of then retest again, and then we made a move to new all-time highs, and you can see we've kind of come back into this area now again. But again, it's all very much range-based PA, if I'm completely honest with you. If we had to map this out as our low and that is our high, you know, we're just trading in this range. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we come and we test this area again, say at around $1.9 or something sitting like this. Wouldn't be surprised. And I also would not be surprised if maybe we came and retested this high, and if I had to draw out 50% of this range, for example, you know, you can already see how and where we are respecting levels. So if I had to leave this on, for example, like that, you can pretty much see that we have traded back below, traded back into this area over here. So let's say, for example, I just do some bar replay so you guys can see. So this would be my range low, range high. You can see that the equilibrium of this is 50%. I don't know if you guys can see it that well on my chart, but basically this black line in between, so it's around $2.65. You can see that we came in here, tested it, then we came and tested this low. So we then retested this low. So if I drop down onto say the 4 hour, you can see we retested this low, traded back into this 50% level, and then we basically rejected it from, you know, a sort of bearish momentum kind of continuation play. And you can see now that that 50 EMA is also proving to be quite a bit of resistance on Ripple at the moment. So yeah, again, no real clear bias on this, to be honest, and I can't really tell where price wants to go, besides looking at these ranges, like I would not be surprised if we test these range highs and lows a couple more times, to be honest. If we look at ADA, for example, is another one was quite interesting. You know, we made a really nice move to the upside, and then we rejected this resistance area sitting at around 1.245. We then came back into our previous support area, or previous resistance area that is now turned support, sitting at around $1.80, which then obviously aligned with this daily 50 EMA. I'm on a weekly time frame, so even stronger, if you want to call it that. You know, we rebalanced on the 50% level. Wouldn't be surprised if we took out, say, 61.8, as well as maybe, you know, as low as 78.6 on the fib tool. And now we seem to be rejecting these areas quite nicely. I mean, even if we look at these sort of displacement levels, so for example, if I mark out this area here with that area there, you can see how we've tested that perfectly. So now it's just a case of kind of being patient and seeing if we can get these momentum shifts back to the upside. If I'm brutally honest with you, that's going to be exactly what I'm going to be looking for, and it's really difficult to kind of gauge. I mean, and that Link is another one. We saw some really good moves, and it just seems like momentum kind of, you know, has really shifted post Trump coming into office, if I'm completely honest with you. I know we had this discussion a couple of weeks back, you know, was this going to be potentially a sell the news event? Definitely feels like for the most part now that it is that sort of way. I actually wouldn't be opposed to trading this on Link. So very similar to the setup on Solana. And if you have a look over here, you can pretty much see how this bullish order flow chain seems to be holding on the daily time frame. And you can see over here, we made a move where we pushed higher. So this was the break over here. So we broke above, right? We retested this and we moved higher. So you would almost expect that we're just doing something similar. I actually could be quite keen on this position, to be honest with you. So if you have a look at Link, for example, you can see that this would be your sort of ultimate low in this scenario. You know, we swept these lows down here. We then made a shift to the upside. So for example, let me just bring back some bar replay to make it a bit easier for you guys to understand but what I'm trying to say. But if you have a look over here, okay, so this would have been my move to the upside. Remember, I showed you guys this in previous examples. Then what I would want to try to do is have my limit entry sitting like this, okay, stop below this area over here, and then I would want to trade back to the upside, okay. And then in this scenario, you can see how price kind of plays out over the next couple of days. You know, we eventually draw back into this area. Okay, so like now, for example, is going to be a perfect example of what I'm trying to show you. And if you have a look here, let the day, you would have got tagged into this entry over here like this. Okay, now in this scenario, this would have been the high that you would be trading. So you're almost getting around 2.7 R. So let's say, for example, you risk $100, you'd be making around $300 if the trade hit your ultimate high. I would then go and let this play out, and you'll then see how we get a really strong reaction to the upside. I'll take a couple of days to play out, but you can see there we get that push. You see, that would have been a perfect trading example of how I like to trade. We get the sweep of the lows, we get this structure shift, so break and structure the highs, we come back, retest this area, which is now sitting as my demand area, and then we then obviously perfectly reject that and push the upside. Okay, so what would I be looking for now? Same sort of thing. On the weekly time frame, I would then look to see, okay, cool, this was my initial sweep over here. So you can see how price action swept this low right over there. Then if you have a look over here, price action then broke that high there. So I would then want to basically set a limit and then try basically trade something like this again. Only because why? This structure broke here on the left. So I would then basically want to have an entry set like this. Okay, and if you have a look here now, we seem to be, so we haven't traded all the way back into this area. But if you have a look here, it looks like we're trading back into this area. So for me now, I would like to actually enter a sort of buy limit entry on here, because this, if we were to continue to trade higher, this would be my order flow chain that I would like to kind of position myself into. If that makes sense. So I would be expecting price to hold, right? So this would be my invalidation point. This would be my entry point, and I would want to trade back into these highs over here. So this is sitting at around $15, call it 10. So what I'll go do now is I head over to my crypto futures platform on PrimeXBT. You can see I'm still actually actively running that Solana position. So I'm just going to leave that for now. I would then bring up link. Link in this example would be what I'm actually looking to trade. And if you guys have a look over here, you can see my active positions that are running. So what I want to do now on Chainlink is I would like to enter a long position, but I would like to have I basically want to enter on that high over there, which is at about $15.88, but I'm just going to round it up to 15.1. And then I'm going to have my take profit and stop there. So this is going to be a position that I'm looking to run live on Link. So I can create, so if you want to create a limit order, you can hover over this, right click on it. It'll bring up this order that looks like this. You can create limit order. Okay. And now it'll obviously, sorry, my bad. I've obviously gone and executed a live position. I would actually need to go and make sure that I'm correctly set on this. Okay, let's start it again. So what I would need to go do now in order to actually execute this is from a buy position. I need to go see on the right hand side here, it will tell me you can either choose between market or limit. I'm going to go set a market or a limit entry order at 15.10, we'll say 10 link, and I'm going to have it as a buy position. So now you'll see over here, this green line will pop up, and that's basically going to be my position that I'm going to be wanting to execute on. And then once I obviously get executed into this position, so right now you'll see it is sitting as an order. When I get executed in the position, it will actually show here as a live an active position. So I will need to then obviously wait a little bit just to make sure that I get into the entry. Once I then get entered into the entry, I can then obviously go manually adjust my stop loss as well as my take profit levels too. So wait until you get tagged into this entry before you can obviously manage your risk management side of things. That's basically, yeah, just really a simple way in which you can kind of go about analyzing a charting idea and then physically executing it on our crypto futures platform, which is obviously a really awesome, easy platform to use. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's live stream. That pretty much wraps it up from my side. I'm obviously going to keep you guys posted if I hear anything from a fundamental perspective changing over the next couple days or weeks. And yeah, that's pretty much my idea for today. So I'm going to leave this kind of pending for now, and I'll catch you guys in next week's live stream. So I hope you guys all enjoyed. Thanks again for sending through all the questions. We'll obviously go through them and choose a lucky winner. So I hope this has been of value to you as a trader and you guys have learned something from today's session. So have a good rest of the week, and I'll catch you guys next week.